The movie begins with a man named Martin who narrates his tragic tale. He and a couple of his friends had gone on a holiday trip to the mountains, where they unexpectedly got their hands on Nazi gold. Just as they were marveling at the treasure, all hell broke loose. Strange and fearsome Nazi zombies started coming out of the ground and brutally attacking. Whoever they bit would turn into a monster like themselves. When they cut Martin, he had no choice but to cut off his arm. Then he took out his girlfriend, since she was bitten too. With no other chance at survival, he dug up the gold they had greedily hidden and gave it back. Back to the present moment. After this nail-biting encounter, Martin runs for his life. Just when it seems like Martin has a shot at survival, fate has other plans. As he huddles safely in his car, a tiny, seemingly inconsequential coin slips from his pocket. Dread creeps up on him because he knows the cruel zombies would be back for it. Just then, the ominous figure of Herzog emerges from the shadows, lurking menacingly outside his car window. Without wasting a second, Herzog smashes the window with his fist and shatters it. He then seizes Martin. The situation quickly escalates as more zombies swarm, desperately trying to breach the sanctuary of Martin's vehicle. In a heart-pounding bid for survival, Martin cranks the ignition and speeds away at breakneck speed. The sheer velocity sends all the pursuing zombies tumbling, except for Herzog, who tenaciously clings to the car. Their race against time takes an unexpected turn when a massive truck hurtles toward them. Herzog still holds onto Martin with the might of every cell in his body. All of a sudden, the truck hits the Nazi zombie, throwing him miles away. His hand gets cleanly cut, and this severed limb is left behind in Martin's car. Before speeding away, Martin makes sure to throw away the demon's treasure. The truck's driver, understandably bewildered, steps out to assess the bizarre scene. He finds Herzog lying on the cold snow. This ignorant man tries to check for his heartbeat. When he finds none, he panics and starts giving the zombie CPR. Midway through his foolish endeavor, Herzog starts to stir and then grabs his prey. With the opportunity at hand, he hastily attacks the man and cuts off his tongue. Poor ignorant truck driver is shocked to the core. He gasps and moves back in fear, but it is already too late for the poor man. The army of zombies reach Herzog and take out the man for their leader. Herzog retrieves the coin that Martin threw out and puts it back inside their little treasure chest. The army assembles before him, and they rejoice at the victory of their retrieved coin. Herzog then issues an eerie command, directing them toward densely populated areas. Meanwhile, Martin, who has been making a desperate getaway, suddenly finds himself battling an overwhelming wave of drowsiness. Struggling to stay awake, his car careens out of control and ends in a catastrophic crash. Darkness engulfs him. When consciousness finally returns, Martin is startled to find himself in a hospital. His relief is short-lived as police officers arrive to interrogate. Despite his earnest responses to their questions, doubt hangs heavily in the air. We cannot blame the officers, though. Who would believe him if, right after a surgery, he opens his eyes and starts talking about some undead monsters? On top of it, he went on a trip with his friends and came back as a lone survivor. Not to mention that his girlfriend was brutally taken out with an axe that had his fingerprints all over. The police officer scoffs at him and asks the doctor if he had some brain damage. The doctor, standing beside Martin, who was just looking over him, merely shrugs. This doctor literally attended to this patient, so how can he just shrug like that? Anyway, in an unfortunate twist of fate, Martin is wrongly accused of the brutal acts that have unfolded, bearing the heavy burden of blame for the unfolding chaos. His cries for help go unanswered. Just as the atmosphere turns dark, the doctor tries to make him happy with a little good news. He tells him that when they found him, he had already lost his right arm, but fortunately for him, they found it frozen inside the car. They took it and successfully reattached it to his arm. Is that even possible? Maybe that undead was Martin's ancestor of the same blood. Or perhaps this doctor is a medical genius. The latter is highly unlikely though, considering his earlier shrug. Martin looks at his hand, only to realize it's not his own. It belongs to Herzog. Shocked, he informs the doctor that this isn't his hand, but before he can react, his hand takes on a mind of its own. In a sudden frenzy, Martin attacks the police officer, pushing him away. He then takes a scalpel lying nearby and cuts down the doctor. In a frenzy, he attacks the people around, causing injuries to several of them. All the while, he chants that it is not him, it is the devil. It takes considerable effort to restrain him, and he's eventually subdued with an anesthetic injection. Meanwhile, on the other side, an old woman and her husband are attacked by Herzog and his team. They infiltrate the area, entering their house and seizing the poor old couple. There, Herzog summons his zombie doctor to perform surgery and attach Martin's severed arm to his own. This hand had fallen in the snow, and they retrieved it to attach it with Herzog's body. Herzog possesses such extraordinary powers that the hand effortlessly integrates with his arm. Later that night, they visit a graveyard where nameless German soldiers are buried. Herzog attempts to resurrect them and add them to his army of the undead but fails. His doctor explains that the deceased bodies in these graves are too old and dispersed. To bring them back to life, they would need freshly deceased people. Upon hearing this, Herzog's eyes land on the church near this graveyard. He goes there to see the priest about to leave. When the priest sees his silhouette, he gets startled but then laughs it off, calling him someone named Nils. The man cannot see his face, thus he just assumes him to be one of his acquaintances. His guess is proved wrong as soon as the undead zombie steps out of the shadows. Seeing the monster, The poor priest runs back inside the church into the Lord's embrace, but unfortunately it is not his most bright day. Soon the man of God is slayed by this devil inside the very church. As the priest passes away, Herzog touches his face, miraculously resurrecting him and enlisting him into his army. The priest becomes Herzog's loyal follower, signifying his incredible abilities. Meanwhile, we find Martin tied tightly to a bed, watched over by a sleeping policeman. He gasps awake from a nightmare in which he saw the Nazi zombies and calls out the policeman, but to no avail. Just as Martin starts feeling helpless, he hears someone whispering near his bed. At that moment, a young boy named Bobby appears. He seems to have snuck inside the room while everyone was busy. The boy is an American traveler and he has come here with his mother. He tells Martin that after observing the sleeping policeman, he seized the opportunity and snuck into Martin's room. It was all due to his zombie hand, apparently. The hand piqued his interest and he took a picture of it and sent it to a zombie squad, a team tasked with hunting down zombies and investigating such occurrences. Bobby tells him that this team has been waiting for such an apocalypse to happen so that they can use their preparations until now. Hearing this, Martin becomes happy and hopeful. He tries to encourage the young boy to open his binding. The boy looks a little skeptical since he knows that the zombie hand can be dangerous. Nevertheless, Martin succeeds in bribing him with the prospect of having chocolate and makes Bobby release him. However, as he prepares to escape, Bobby realizes there's a policeman outside, and which means he can't make a clean getaway. As he stands there, contemplating his choice, Bobby keeps pestering him about his promised chocolate. Then, something inexplicable occurs with Martin's out-of-control hand. It grabs the whiny teenager and the window. Alarmed at the ferocity of his zombie hand, Martin rushes to the scene to find Bobby unconscious. He attempts to revive him, pressing on his chest. But with an unexpected surge of power, he presses too hard, causing Bobby's chest to crush and his bones to break. This bizarre incident is attributed to the extraordinary strength of Martin's hand. Poor Bobby didn't deserve that. The policeman wakes up from his nap and realizes that Martin is gone. He runs inside and looks out from the broken window. Observing from a distance, he sees Martin crouched over the little boy's corpse and now firmly believes that Martin is responsible for Bobby's passing. He jumps out the window and runs after the culprit. Martin makes a run for it, and the pursuing policeman follows suit. However, Martin's hand takes another peculiar turn. Among the parked cars in the vicinity, there's a Mercedes. His hand dislodges the car's logo and hurls it at the policeman, striking him in the head and causing him to collapse on the spot. In the background, another police officer is witnessing this gruesome crime. Following the car logo incident, Martin's hand continues to display its mysterious ability. It smashes the car's window, shifts gears, starts the engine, and speeds away, leaving Martin confused regarding how to control it. Meanwhile, Bobby's mobile phone remains in Martin's possession, and it rings with a call from the zombie squad. Martin answers the call and proceeds to recount the harrowing tale of the zombies' activity. In response, the voice on the other end identifies as Daniel, the leader of the zombie squad. Daniel, along with his two female assistants, Monica and Blake, hails from America and offers assistance. They are resolute in their mission to help Martin discover the purpose behind the zombie rampage and the impending destruction. Back in Norway, we see a police officer named Gunga arrive at his station. His assistant briefs him on all the cases happening around and the things that they need to keep an eye on. Gunga seems like a very carefree guy, so much so that he does not seem to even care about the crimes that he is supposed to care about. Amidst all the cases, he hears about Martin's case and they get a little amused when they hear how he used a Mercedes logo to get rid of that poor police officer. On the other side, the zombie squad from the US shortly arrives in Norway. They pinpoint Martin's location. Realizing the gravity of the situation, they decide to arm themselves with weapons to combat the zombies effectively. The group arrives at a store and buys a lot of axes and other sharp objects to use as weapons. As they pay up and leave the store, Blake muses that it would have been a lot easier if only they could buy weapons here. Daniel sighs and agrees. They're out of luck since they are not in America. Armed and prepared, they set out on their mission. Meanwhile, Martin visits a World War II museum. At the entrance, he accidentally runs into a man, and before his arm could go rogue, he quickly runs away. Nearing the museum, he sees a newspaper stand featuring his picture as a fugitive on the run. Grabbing the newspaper, he enters the place where he encounters a clerk who seems engrossed in the very newspaper that features Martin. As the clerk folds the newspaper, he sees Martin's picture and immediately tries calling out for help, but to no avail. Martin repeatedly inquires about Herzog, but the clerk remains tight-lipped. When he sees that the clerk is too petrified to speak, the man resorts to violence, although this time he seems to have a little control over his hand. Finally, the clerk begins to share the history of Herzog's relation with Hitler. Herzog turned out to be best buddies with the Nazi devil leader. He was a general in Hitler's army and was tasked with the mission to annihilate Talvik. Before he could carry out the mission, he and his men were slaughtered in Oxford. After hearing the historical account, Martin pieces together a disturbing revelation. Since these zombies were tasked with a mission they failed to accomplish, they have come back to life just to take that out. They want to complete the sinister plans that were thwarted by the intervention of Oxford men. Given this revelation, Martin, with a map in his possession, pinpoints the museum's location right within the village of Talvik. Martin is about to contemplate his next move when abruptly, blood-curdling screams reverberate from outside. Rushing to the window, They witness Herzog and his formidable team, accompanied by menacing tanks. The army is ruthlessly exterminating the village inhabitants and forcibly assimilating them into their zombie ranks. Watching all this from the window, Martin and the clerk are scared out of their minds, in a desperate bid to preserve their lives. The both of them make a hasty retreat, clutching their belongings, and take refuge within the museum's confines. Herzog and his men briefly enter the museum. They break almost all the glass display cases and take the belongings. They go around looking at everything on display. Herzog sees the map and smashes the glass covering it. He snatches up the map. As the soldiers look around, they come across two peculiar statues in the corner. They are in fact none other than Martin and the clerk. The two remain quiet, holding their breaths and frozen like statues. The zombie soldier looks closely at Martin but then decides that it is nothing but a handsome statue. Herzog takes his men and the map, then departs, leaving Martin and the clerk in a nerve-wracking silence. As the menacing soldiers go away, the two men finally release their long-held breaths. Emerging from their hiding place, they encounter a few wandering zombies outside the museum. Martin looks at his hand and decides to see the extent of its power. With eerie precision, he dispatches each zombie one by one using his extraordinary hand. Turns out, he is slowly learning to use and control this limit well. The two see a poor deceased man lying down with his eyes open, and Martin sighs, sadly closing his eyes. However, in a startling turn of events, this touch of his hand accidentally revives him. As he gets up, Martin is overcome with fear and swiftly eliminates the man once more. The clerk tells him that it was his touch that revived this man just like Herzog. This unsettling discovery makes Martin realize that he possesses an array of astonishing power. Eager to explore the full extent of this newfound ability, he touches the deceased man again, restoring him to life. The man gets up, but unlike Herzog's revived zombies, he does not attack. Instead, he is just another gloomy, lost man. But fate does not seem to be on his side, as for the third time, he is attacked fatally. An axe suddenly descends, striking the resurrected man's head. The axe-wielding hand belongs to none other than zombie hunter Daniel, who makes sure to capture the moment with a photograph. Martin is shocked to see the zombie squad in person. He certainly had not hoped for some dainty-looking young lads to turn up. Just to make sure it is indeed them, he confirms a couple of times. Though Martin had hoped for a different outcome, he chooses to demonstrate his hand's power once more, resurrecting the same man, now with an axe stuck to his face. It just isn't his day. Impressed by Martin's remarkable abilities, Daniel suggests that they assemble an army of their own to fight off Herzog. He shares information about Russian soldiers who fell victim to Herzog and were buried in snowy graves. By resurrecting these deceased soldiers, they could form a formidable force and exact revenge on Herzog. Martin agrees to Daniel's proposal. They embark on their mission to resurrect the deceased bodies, leaving Monica and Blake along with the clerk behind to keep an eye on Herzog. The plan is for them to delay Herzog and his team so they have more time to accomplish their objective. In the meantime, Herzog advances with his tanks, while his soldiers continue their grim work of converting people into zombies. Meanwhile, Gunga has come with his team to the location of the crime, the museum. There, they look at the corpses and wonder what the hell happened. Gunga and his lazy team does not even try to pursue and solve the crime. Instead, they are there just for show. A team of real forensics and useful police officers, unlike them, would arrive in the evening. Just as they are about to leave, one of his men arrives with the CCTV footage. There, they see the infamous runaway fugitive, Martin. On the other side, Monica and Blake hatch a daring plan. One of them will venture out to lure a zombie, with the intention of leading the horde back to their location. The other's role will be to detonate explosives and eliminate the pursuing zombie. But they recognize the need for someone familiar with the area, someone who can navigate this perilous task. That someone turns out to be none other than the clerks. The man approaches the zombies, attempting to coax them to follow him. Initially, Herzog's soldiers are hesitant, but eventually he manages to lead the zombies in his direction. They execute their plan flawlessly, setting off the explosives and successfully eliminating the pursuing zombie. The trio revels in the success of their risky endeavor. However, Herzog is not one to be outdone. In a vengeful rage, he redirects his tank towards them, launching a relentless attack. His tank's gun targets them repeatedly. He looks at the distance through his binoculars, and when he sees no one, he orders his men to leave. They believe that the group has met their end. In the meantime, Daniel and his team face an unexpected hurdle as their car gets stuck in the snow. They realize that they need to free the car by placing something underneath the tire. Given their situation, they decide to use the poor man that Martin resurrected. These two geniuses literally position the zombie beneath the tire, and miraculously, the car gains traction and begins moving forward once more. Following this, the man once again falls to his demise, and unlucky for him, he is once again resurrected by Martin. This man just can't catch a break. Their journey takes them to the location where the Russian soldiers' bodies were interred. Displaying its extraordinary power, Martin's hand resurrects the Russian soldiers from their graves. All the corpses look wild and menacing. A sense of trepidation fills the air as Martin wonders if these resurrected Russians will heed his command. Just then, a formidable Russian commander approaches Martin. Martin can't help but feel intimidated, as this commander is no ordinary man. He is a tall, imposing figure. His posture looks dominant, a force to be reckoned with. Yet, to Martin's relief, it appears that the Russian soldiers are acknowledging him as their leader. Meanwhile, Herzog continues to advance with his team, determined to carry out his ominous mission. Gunga finally hears news of this Nazi group of zombies. He orders his men to pursue the group, shoot first and then ask later. Some real badass leadership. As morning breaks, the real showdown begins. Martin confronts Herzog. He warns the zombie to go back to his cold cave since he will fail his mission once more. As the zombies start to laugh at his threat, he tears his sleeve and shows off the arm. Herzog immediately shuts up. Tension hangs heavy in the air as Martin extends his hand for Herzog to see. It's the hand that once belonged to Herzog himself, a symbol of the power now in Martin's possession. Just then, a complete team of Russian soldiers arrive and stand in solidarity with Martin. The sight of this sizable army leaves Herzog utterly stunned, as he did not anticipate such a formidable opposition. The Russian commander, driven by a deep-seated desire for revenge, keeps his focus on Herzog. Finally, with the orders from their respective leaders, the two armies begin to advance toward each other. The Russian commander steels himself for the battle ahead, ignoring the many zombies that attempt to block his path. He ruthlessly eliminates each one in his relentless pursuit of Herzog. As the fierce combat unfolds, Gunga alongside his team also pull up. They arrive at just the right time to witness the intense clash between these opposing forces. Gunga exclaims at the scene ahead, asking if there is a carnival in town. All of a sudden, the massive tank comes hurtling menacingly toward their car. Just as it is about to crush their vehicle, they manage to escape in the nick of time. Martin swiftly directs Daniel to go after the tank. In the meantime, Herzog and the Russian general engage in a fierce battle. The scared police officers seek refuge in a nearby house and look out at the savage scene. It is nothing like they have ever seen before. Gunga's assistant immediately spots Martin and asks Gunga if they should barge in and grab the man. The scared man almost passes out from fear and tells her that they would wait for the situation to calm down before taking any action. He calls it tactical police work. Back on the battlefield, Monica, Blake, and the clerk rejoin the fray. Martin's team demonstrates remarkable strength and cohesion. As the battle rages on, the Russian general makes a move to eliminate Herzog, but a surprise attack from a Nazi zombie catches him off guard. Herzog's team seizes the opportunity, subdues the Russian soldier, and together they dispatch him. The tide of battle appears to shift, with the Russians facing a disadvantage. Watching their team crumble, Martin's team devises a new strategy. Target Herzog, the source of the zombie's existence. If Herzog falls, his entire army may crumble. Martin, determined to carry out this plan, attacks Herzog amidst the chaos. In the fierce confrontation that ensues, Herzog inflicts severe injuries on Martin, but Martin wields the power of Herzog's own hand and thus manages to stand his ground. Meanwhile, Daniel manages to gain control of the tank. Amid the raging battle, almost all the Russian soldiers meet their end, while the Nazis remain unscathed. Only 3 survivors remain, including Monica, the clerk, and Blake. Tragically, the poor clerk succumbs to the relentless onslaught of zombies, leaving only Monica and Blake to fight for their lives. They find themselves surrounded, trapped by the relentless undead. Meanwhile, Martin and Herzog continue their intense struggle by the tank, locked in a fierce combat. Daniel, who had managed to control the tank, is attacked by another zombie. As he struggles to break free, the tank hits a house while Herzog and Martin are fighting. It throws them off and fortunately gives both Daniel and Martin an advantage. In a critical moment, Martin jumps onto the tank and Herzog follows suit. An intense battle rages with Martin almost having the lead, but the tank suddenly stops and he falls down onto a car. Herzog takes this opportunity to strike the final blow. However, Daniel takes swift action. He maneuvers the tank's powerful gun to target Herzog and unleashes a fatal shot that decapitates his head. This finally ends the zombie's reign of. With Herzog's demise, his entire army of zombies also meets its end. Monica and Blake, who were previously trapped, find themselves freed from the zombie menace. Victory is theirs, and they celebrate the successful completion of their mission. The zombie hunters finally depart. As they all go away, the police squad finally emerges to see nothing but slaughtered zombies. Meanwhile, Martin leaves in his car. His journey takes him to a grave in the cemetery, Hannah's final resting place. There, Martin digs up Hannah's grave and places his hand upon her lifeless body. Miraculously, she awakens, with rotting flesh and pus leaking down her mouth. They are finally reunited, but at what cost? The movie ends with the Nazi doctor discovering Herzog's severed head, which astonishingly remains alive.